What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. College football's Week 9 action is officially in the books, and I can't believe that this season has gone by so fast because it seems like just yesterday we were talking about Miami destroying Florida on the road, and here we are about to enter week 10. This is the home stretch, people. This is when it's time to make that playoff push. This is when the contenders start to separate themselves from the pretenders. And last night, in LSU versus Texas A&M, we saw two teams separate themselves. A&M looks like a true contender. Meanwhile, LSU, man, all I got to say is I've been telling y'all for a while about Brian Kelly. This dude is never going to win the big one at LSU. And it's funny how they were up 17-7 at one point in the third quarter, and then you blink, and A&M is up 28-17. And not only was that the only game that kind of showed us how this season is about to mold into, because this is a chaotic year of college football, people. There's probably only one elite team, that being Oregon. Ohio State, we don't really know too much about them until they play Penn State this upcoming weekend. But I'm still confident, despite Ohio State's close win over Nebraska, that they're good enough to at least take down Penn State. They do it damn near every year. What the hell has gone wrong with Oklahoma? I was really high on the Sooners coming into this year. I thought this potentially could be a 9-win team, but everything has gone wrong with this program. We got to break down what has gone left for the Sooners this year. Alabama and Miami, they rolled to dominant victories. And Colorado is going to give Miss Peggy that bowl game that Dion promised. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in, wherever you're watching, YouTube, X, Facebook. Before you dive into it, do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we go live and drop new content. Shout out to Maddie King in the chat. He says, what the haters gonna say about Coach Prime now? Hey, man, I guess they're gonna say the Big 12 isn't good and they didn't play anybody. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Let's dive into it. LSU completely imploded last night on the road in College Station against Texas A&M. They were up 17-7 at one point during this game. It seemed like they were going to roll to a dominant win, get a statement victory on the road, and show everybody how they're the team to beat in the SEC. However, out of nowhere, late in the third quarter, Texas A&M just randomly took control of this game. Garrett Nussmeier throws a couple of costly interceptions. They make a quarterback change, going from Connor Wigman to Marcell Reed, who was playing like a man possessed out there, because as soon as he came in, Texas A&M's offense just went completely off the chain. They scored like 5 straight on their last couple of possessions to end the game. LSU has a botched field goal snap, and missed field goals were really costly for LSU in this game. They had a few earlier as well, and A&M just completely dog-walked LSU on the ground. They had over 200 rushing yards, and it's just a really disappointing time to be an LSU fan right now, because if you would have won this game, you would have found yourself in first place in the SEC and control of your own destiny. But instead, you fall to that Mike Elko magic, and you're in a really tough situation right now, because next week's game against Alabama is must win for you. It doesn't get any bigger than that. Win or go home. The loser of that game is going to end up watching the playoffs from the seat of their couch. And I was never high on LSU to begin with coming into this season because, first of all, Brian Kelly has showed that he's not a great head coach in terms of being able to get you over the hump. Mike Elko, last year, where is he at? Duke. And although he didn't lead them to a playoff game or anything notable at Duke, he was able to do more with less. Kalen DeBoer led Washington to the national championship with the 34th best roster in college football. But Brian Kelly has been unable to win the big games at Notre Dame, and we continuously see him now at LSU fall short, in these big time matchups. Brian Kelly, once again, in this loss to Texas A&M, showed the whole entire world why this dude is the biggest fraud in college football. This dude is not an elite head coach. When you look at LSU, going into this season, they had a bunch of concerns about their defense. They bring in Blake Baker, Missouri's former defensive coordinator, and you thought that would be able to improve your defense, which it has slightly, but not at a high enough level for you to be a championship caliber football team. And I got a lot of pushback from LSU fans when I picked A&M to win this game because they were making excuses for their run defense, saying, oh, our run defense has been okay. You don't know what you're talking about. We've only given up big plays here and there. Against South Carolina, your run defense got shredded, and you should have won. You should have lost that game. The only reason you won was because of a special teams mishap by South Carolina, and you had some favorable calls in that game. You lost to USC. Anytime you can run the football with success against LSU, you got a great chance of being able to beat this team. This defense, they're not that good up front. And the back end of their secondary, they had a pretty okay game until they had to go up against the animal that was Marcell Reed. And Marcell Reed, oh my goodness, what was A&M doing? Putting this guy on the bench in favor of Connor Wigman. This dude looks like the second coming of Jaden Daniels. I mean, he was unstoppable. He could do no wrong. The dude was throwing dots. He had a nice pass late in this game where he split two defenders right in the middle of the field. I mean, this dude is making dudes miss, looking like Houdini back there at QB. Texas A&M, without a doubt, they're rolling with this dude for the rest of the season, and he may be the future of this program. He could be a future Heisman Trophy contender with the kind of upside and potential that he possesses. He looks like Lamar and Jaden Daniels put together. Very accurate throw of the football. This was probably his best passing display of the season. Okay, Marcell Reed was throwing some absolute dots. And A&M moving forward, you're in prime control of the SEC right now. You're now in first place. And if you win out, you can find yourself in the SEC championship game. That only depends on if you can beat South Carolina this upcoming week and what happens the last game of the regular season when you got to go up against Texas. But A&M, I'm not going to say that they're a big surprise because initially I was really high on A&M. I thought that they had the ceiling of a 10-win team at best, but ultimately I picked them to go 7-5, 8-4 just because I didn't know how consistent their offense was going to be. But with how dominant they've been running the football this year and how lights out their defense has been, I keep asking myself, like, how did this team lose to Notre Dame in week 1? Notre Dame, I refuse to buy them as a playoff team. They just don't look like playoff material to me. If A&M was to play Notre Dame again, they would smack the Irish. Straight up. A&M is having a magical season year 1 under Mike Elko. It's no surprise because the difference between him and Brian Kelly is that this dude has been able to win with less. So when you give him more at a job like Texas A&M that has unlimited resource, access to the best guys in the portal, the best guys coming out of high school, and this team already had a really good roster based off the foundation that Jimbo Fisher laid in recruiting, it's no surprise that they're having such a good season up to this point. Now, can they win out and finish the regular season with only one loss? Time will tell. But it's a safe bet to see A&M in the SEC championship this year. They've been the most consistent team in this conference, and they probably are the most well-rounded team in the SEC in terms of they don't really have any big weaknesses. This is a pretty balanced team all around. Offensive line is good. You got capable wide receivers. You got really good quarterback play. No matter if you choose to go back to Wigman, I don't think Wigman is a crappy quarterback. He's not as good as what Jimbo Fisher hyped him up to be, but he's pretty decent. But last night, you just had to go to Marcell Reed because you needed to change. And it feels like once Marcell Reed came into the game, LSU's defense just completely was in shambles. They didn't know how to game plan for this dude. But moving forward, I'm really excited to see how Mike Elko's first year at Texas A&M turns out, because we've seen guys like Curt Cignetti, Coach Prime, Kalani Sitake at BYU be able to turn around their programs after a down season really fast. And LSU moving forward, I really don't see them being a playoff team. I think realistically they're going to end this season probably losing to Bama and Vanderbilt, and they're an 8-4 team to close out. It's really hard to buy into Brian Kelly, a guy that continuously has made a lot of excuses for why he can't win the big one throughout his career. And once again, he showed tonight that he's not a great head coach because he can't win the big ones. Just like how he couldn't win the big ones at Notre Dame with less resources, the dude continues to overachieve at a school that gives you the best of everything that you need to win. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Shout out to JT, the guitarist, still waiting on that Georgia recap. Man, it's just so late now. The game's already over, my dude. I just missed out on the opportunity, my dude. My bad. You know I don't hate Georgia, though. Carla Jenkins, shout out to you. She says Prime is bowl bound at 6-2. Absolutely. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in wherever you're watching. Facebook, YouTube, X. Smash that like button. Hit that bell icon so you don't miss when we drop new content, when we go live. Give us a follow as well on the social medias, and DM any questions that you have. They will be answered on a future mailbag episode. You can find us on Instagram at JTSports_ and on X at JTSports__. And give us a 5-star review. We are not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode along with all of our previous episodes on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Now, Ohio State had a really close call against Nebraska that I don't think any of us saw coming. Nebraska, they just got crashed a week ago by Indiana. So you would think that Ohio State will come in and they will roll these boys. They will cover that 25.5-point spread. But instead, they end up sneaking out a 21-17 win, which Nebraska, if it wasn't for a couple of things that didn't go their way in the end zone, they got stopped a couple of times, they probably would have won that game. Okay, it definitely wasn't the best game that we've seen out of Ohio State this year, but I'm not about to define Ohio State based off one close call, because if this year's college football season has showed us anything, is that we don't really have an elite team outside of Oregon. So therefore, you're going to see a lot of inconsistent play out of a lot of these teams that most of us would perceive to be good enough to win a national championship. And the reason why you can't judge Ohio State off this win and say that, oh, they're a fraud, they aren't going to beat Penn State, they may not even be better than Indiana, is because, remember, Georgia, when they lost to Alabama on the road, they had that close call against the University of Kentucky. a lot of folks going into that game against Texas thought that Texas was bound to win that game and that it was their game to lose. And we saw Georgia really early in that game show us that they still are the team that most of us expected them to be coming into this year. You can still be a dominant team and have a couple of off games. We've seen Alabama have a couple of losses this year. They lose to Tennessee, they lose to Vandy, but they just destroyed Missouri and ended their playoff hopes. You can't judge any team based off a 1 week sample size, based off how chaotic this season has been. You have to judge a team based off the overall body of work. And we've seen Georgia in the past under Kirby Smart show that they're able to play their best football in the biggest games when their back seems to be up against the wall. And that's the same way that I feel about Ohio State. The same way people were talking about Georgia going into that Texas game. It's the same way people are talking about Ohio State under Ryan Day going into this big matchup against Penn State. But no matter how sloppy Ohio State may play, I'm not trusting little game James Franklin to beat this team. Ohio State, they own James Franklin. They own Penn State football. When you talk about Penn State football, you talk about how Ohio State is their daddy, and they own them. And we've seen a lot of times throughout James Franklin's career, he struggles to win these big-time games. And I don't see anything being differently this year. Penn State, they got a good team, but they're not as talented as what Ohio State is. It's a pretty obvious gap between Oregon, Ohio State, and the rest of the Big Ten. From a talent standpoint, you can tell that both those two programs were just miles ahead of everybody else in the Big Ten this year. And Penn State, they're a tier 2 team in the Big Ten. They're not on the first tier like Oregon and Ohio State are, because I still don't believe that Penn State is a dominant team. And we've seen them be down 20-3 at halftime against USC, and they were able to dig themselves from up out of that hole. But I don't see them being able to beat Ohio State with the fact that their offense still isn't that dynamic to me. I don't believe that Drew Aller is going to have a great day against Ohio State's defense, which has been a lot of talk about how that defense has kind of somewhat underperformed this year under Jim Knowles. Some of the guys that they brought back, like JTT, Jack Sawyer, they haven't had as good as a year as what you expected them. But with so much being on the line for Ohio State in this game, I expect them to play their best football. Ryan Day is not a bad coach. A lot of Ohio State fans want this dude fired damn near every week, but you got guys like Brian Kelly who have everything in the world that they need to win big-time games, and they've been unable to get it done. I like James Franklin. I see Penn State being a playoff team, but I don't see them being able to pull off the win this year against the Buckeyes, man. The Buckeyes still have more firepower on offense. You got this true freshman phenom in Jeremiah Smith, who seems to make big plays every single week. You still got a really good running back room, although the two-headed monster of Henderson and Judkins hasn't been what I thought it would be. And they do have some offensive line issues, which kind of makes it a little bit favorable for Penn State with how good their defensive line is. But you can't judge Ohio State based off how they've looked against Nebraska. You got to judge Ohio State based off the team that they are overall. Same thing with Georgia. We know that Georgia, they're capable of playing their best football any day of the week. Same thing with Ohio State. Ohio State is a well-coached football team. I don't think that Ryan Day is in that Brian Kelly or Lincoln Riley territory. And if Ohio State can win this game, I believe that it's going to end all the doubts about this team being able to win the Big Ten, because they do have to play Indiana. Indiana, I believe, has a better chance at beating Ohio State than what Penn State does, as crazy as that may be to believe. But Curt Cignetti, this dude just knows how to win. James Franklin, yeah, he knows how to win, but not against Ohio State. Penn State hasn't been convincing enough to me, and I haven't seen out of them this year to warrant giving them the benefit of a doubt over Ohio State. A lot of people are going to pick Penn State because they've looked like the better of the two teams over the last couple of weeks, but like Texas versus Georgia showed us, you can't judge a team based off a few off games because a lot of these teams have the ability to play their best football, and Ohio State is one of those teams. I was watching Oregon pulverize Illinois the other day, 38-9, and the whole time I was watching that game, I was just saying to myself, like, is Oregon really a college football team? Because when you watch Oregon play, they look like an NFL team. I mean, they got defensive linemen that are like 300 plus, running 4.6, 4.7, big, huge linebackers just speeding around the field, making plays, getting big hits. And I was telling myself, like, Oregon is an NFL team cosplaying as a college football team. The Big Ten, they might have to ban Oregon from this conference because they look miles above the rest of everybody else in the Big Ten. And not just in the Big Ten in particularly, but Oregon clearly is the only elite team that we have in college football this year. They are the only team that has been consistent in their performance from week 1 to now. And earlier during the year, they had some scares against Idaho and Boise State, but it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish, and they're hitting their stride right now. They are playing their best football at the time of the year that you want to be playing your best football, because this is the home stretch. This is the final run for you to separate yourself as a contender versus the rest of the pretenders, and we already knew that Oregon was in it to win it all before the season started, but right now, it's not really a debate who the best team is in college football. You're not always what your record says you are, but Oregon, they are. They're currently 8-0, and they probably are going to be the only team in the FBS to finish out undefeated, because I don't see anybody beating this team, man. They just have NFL guys across the board. With how aggressive and physical that defense is, it's hard to really move the ball on them. Illinois is one of the more physical teams in the Big Ten. Brent Bielema, this dude is a Big Ten traditionalist. He has been in the Big Ten since the beginning of time, it seems like. He knows what it takes to win in this conference, but Oregon just completely bullied them. And Illinois is probably going to finish this season with 9-10 wins potentially. And Oregon, it just seemed like Illinois had no chance at all against them. They were struggling to get a first down on offense. It just was a really bad day for Illinois. And every time you cut to Illinois sidelines, whether it was their quarterback or Brent Bielema, they just looked defeated. Like, they just looked like they knew they had no chance in hell at being able to beat this juggernaut of a team that Dan Lanning has assembled. And when I watch Oregon, I see the West Coast version of Georgia. I see a program that has the kind of athletes up front on the offensive line, the defensive line that Kirby Smart loves to recruit. I can see the mentality, the aggressive approach that Dan Lanning has, that he wants his defense to play with. Same thing as Kirby Smart. He wants his defense to play with an aggressive mentality. And offensively, man, they're just smooth. I know it kind of is a little bit unimpressive with how many short passes their offense likes to throw every game, but they also got the ability to destroy you downfield as well, like we saw against Ohio State. That was my biggest question about Oregon. Are they good enough to stretch the field? And we saw that more than one time against Ohio State, them generating big plays in the passing game, but they also can generate big plays in the passing game with guys taking a 5-yard slant and taking it to the house for a 40, 50-yard touchdown. They also can run the football down your throat. Oregon, with the team that Dan Lanning has put together this year, they look a lot like those vintage Georgia teams that we've seen the last couple of years under Kirby Smart. It's hard to move those big fellas up front. those big fellas are pushing you around on the offense side of the football, and it's pick your poison. They can beat you doing anything. If they got to beat you in a dogfight and a defensive slugfest, they can win that. But if they got to get into a shootout, they got to put up 30, 40 to beat you, they can do that as well, because they got a Heisman Trophy contender in Dillon Gabriel, and nobody's really talking enough about him. Everybody's talking about Travis Hunter, Ashton Jeanty at Boise State, but Dillon Gabriel has been just as good as everybody else. And nobody's really talking about how good this dude is playing. Like, they just scoff over it. They acknowledge it, but they really don't give Dillon Gabriel the credit he deserves for how well he's played. Like, he deserves to be in New York. He deserves to be talked about for the Heisman in the same way we talk about it when it comes to Ashton Jeanty and Travis Hunter. We making it seem like it's just a two-person race for this thing. Like, no, Cam Ward still is in it. Dillon Gabriel still is in it. This dude's been playing some really outstanding football. He's been efficient. He's taking care of the football. I've been nothing short of impressed with how good Dillon Gabriel has looked. And I really can't believe Oklahoma chose Jackson Arnold over this brother. That has to be one of the biggest mistakes in Oklahoma football history, allowing Dillon Gabriel to walk out the door, because he's one of the better quarterbacks that I've watched in all my years watching college football. He's not Lamar or Marcus Mariota, anything like that, but he's just really consistent. And getting consistent high-level quarterback playing college football is something that's underappreciated, because we've seen even the best of teams this year, like Georgia and Alabama, not get good quarterback play as good as what Oregon's getting out of Dillon Gabriel this year. So if I had to give you guys my Heisman power rankings right now, Dillon Gabriel probably will be 3 or 4 behind Cam Ward, because he's been playing some good football, and he's one of the biggest reasons why Oregon has a great chance to win it all this year. But this team, just overall, you have a great quarterback and you got an overall great roster around them. It just screams Oregon's going to win it all, even though I'm still stubborn to, get on the Oregon bandwagon. It's not like I don't think Oregon's not going to win it all, but I still believe that Ohio State, if they were to play Oregon again, whether it be in the Big Ten championship or somewhere down the line in the playoffs, Ohio State will win the rematch, because they only lost to Oregon by 1 point. And the gap in talent between those two teams, there isn't none at all. Oregon's roster and Ohio State's roster, they both are about the same. They both have the same amount of NFL guys. They both spent a good amount of money in NIL to assemble these rosters. So I expect these two teams to be probably in the conversation to win it all when it's all said and done. I wouldn't be surprised if we've seen the Oregon versus Ohio State national championship with the way this season is playing out. But Oregon just is unfair. The Big Ten, it's pretty obvious that Oregon is the king of the crop in this conference for the moment, because the gap between them and everybody else in this conference is really noticeable, with the speed differential, the size differential. Just Oregon is just so much better than everybody else in this conference. What the hell has gone wrong with Oklahoma this year? Because coming into this season, I was expecting this to be a 9-win team. I thought that the offense was going to be pretty good. Jackson Arnold would have a breakout season. The defense would be a championship caliber unit. And the only thing that's been factual has been the fact that Oklahoma does have a championship caliber defense. And it's a shame that it's being wasted by an inept offense. And they fired Seth Luttrell not too long ago. He was supposed to replace Jeff Lebby, and I didn't think Jeff Lebby was that good of an OC for Oklahoma. But losing him, it's pretty evident that he had a major role in how effective that offense has been the last couple of years under Brent Venables, because right now that offense is just in shambles. yeah, you got a lot of injuries that you've been dealing with at wide receiver. You're down pretty much all your starters. Your offensive line is a little bit banged up as well, but your offensive line already was an issue coming into this year because you're going to have to start a lot of guys from the portal, so you didn't have a lot of chemistry on that unit. But Jackson Arnold, he had his best game of the season against Ole Miss, but overall, this dude has been a huge disappointment. And the fact that you had to go back to him is a fact. It just shows that you don't have good enough quarterback play for you to be actually taken seriously in the SEC, because the thing about playing in the SEC is that you can't win games like your Iowa. Just relying on good special teams and great defense is going to get you far in this conference. You got to have competent quarterback play, and you got to have a competent offense. The injuries haven't done Oklahoma any justice this year, but the coaching staff that Brent Venables put together this year is not good, and he definitely has to hit that coaching carousel and find a new offensive coordinator. I asked Oklahoma fans a few days ago how would they feel about the hiring of Dan Mullen, and it was overwhelming no by a lot of you Sooners fans. And my question is, if you don't want Dan Mullen, who's out there on your wish list for offensive coordinators that you would like this program to hire? Because it's not like when you're looking for an offensive coordinator, it's like looking for a head coach. You know who the studs are. You don't really know who the great play callers are, because it's like, if you're going to hire an offensive coordinator, you're either going to hire a guy from a smaller program and see what he can do out of school like Oklahoma with more talent to work with. But it's not like a lot of these dudes we really know too much about, like they're household names. And I don't see anything wrong with going out and hiring Dan Mullen. The dude has shown that he is a really elite play caller, and we've seen how far Florida's offense has dipped in terms of production from how good they were under Dan Mullen to what they've been under Billy Napier. But for Oklahoma to be 1-4 and SEC play right now, to me, is really shocking. It may not be to a lot of you guys, but Oklahoma has recruited at a really high level. They have brought in top 10 recruiting classes every single year. Brent Venables has been the head coach down there in Norman. And you felt like this program was heading in the right direction. They was on a really good trajectory. They gave Brent Venables that extension early on. I think it was before or early during the season. Some people were a little bit against it. They was like, what has Brent Venables proved? And now those people that had their doubts about Brent Venables, they're yelling right now how they were right. But I still see Brent Venables being a very good head coach. And I'm not really concerned about the future of Oklahoma, because this program is one of the best in the country when it comes to recruiting and developing the talent that they get out of high school. A lot of those guys, Danny Stutzman, Billy Bowman, were highly touted coming out of high school, and they've lived up to the hype. The only problem is that you don't have good quarterback play. You got some issues on the offensive line, and the football guys just have been hating on you this year because all of your best receivers are injured. But moving forward for Oklahoma, I think that they'll be better after this season. Brent Venables, he's definitely going to learn a couple of lessons or two after this year. He definitely is going to go out there and get him a quarterback. It's not hard for a program like Oklahoma to bounce back. They got a lot of money. They got a lot of resources. It really is just, can they hire the right offensive coordinator? And I believe that they can. If Brent Venables can hire Jeff Lebby and that dude can become a head coach, he can do it again. That's what good coaches do. Not every hire that you make always works out. But the good thing is that you know when to hold them and you know when to fold them. It's good to see that Brent Venables isn't one of those coaches that holds on to guys longer than what they need to be. You see what a guy is, you don't give him the benefit of a doubt, and you move on. And that's something that I think is a sign that Brent Venables is going to be a great head coach for Oklahoma, because unlike Lincoln Riley, he's not holding on to coordinators that aren't performing up to the level expected at OU. Brent Venables, the dude fired Seth Luttrell, and that dude wasn't even the offensive coordinator for the full season this year. So that shows that this dude is not hesitant to make changes when he realizes changes need to be made. In Oklahoma moving forward, the talent's there, the recruiting's there. They got everything that it takes to win the SEC outside of getting good quarterback play. I'm not about to turn on Brent Venables when all of his best players on offense are injured and he just missed that quarterback. Jackson Arnold, he recruited him out of high school, and when you are a coach, sometimes you're going to hit on guys. Sometimes you're going to whiff on guys. He's a defensive-minded coach and not always going to get it right. I'm not making excuses for Brent Venables, but I'm just laying out that there are more reasons to be optimistic about Oklahoma's program than there are to be pessimistic about it, because they did have a 10-win season last year, and they did beat Texas, and yes, it was in the Big 12. The SEC, we obviously know, is an entirely different animal, but you can't turn on a dude based off one season. And we still got a lot of season left to play. Like, I could see Oklahoma maybe winning 7 games this year, but if they only win 6, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. This program does have everything that it takes to win it all. You just need to hire the right guys and they get the right quarterback in there. And nobody can ever predict injuries. And with the transfer portal and NIL, it has ruined a lot of depth that teams have normally used to have. Normally, a school like Oklahoma would be too deep at wide receiver. But now, with guys transferring out because they don't want to wait their turn or they want to get paid more money, you don't have that same amount of depth as what you used to have in years prior. And that's what has hurt Oklahoma, is that they don't really have good depth on offense. And a lot of guys they've been throwing out there at wide receiver, they're really young, really inexperienced. And, it really isn't good to get blown out by South Carolina, get blown out by your arch nemesis, Texas. But I think that Oklahoma will be better after this year. It is a little bit disappointing how left things have gone. But, really early coming into this season, they were already screwed because a lot of their best players were already injured and banged up rolling into the season because of the injuries they sustained in fall camp. So that's never a good sign. It just is one of those seasons where if you're an OU fan, you just got to take it on the chin, accept that, this year is going to be a letdown, and look forward to next season. As disappointing as what that is, because you got to wait a whole nother 11, 12 months for that to happen. But Oklahoma, I'm not about to write off Brent Venables because of one down season. Making the transition from the Big 12 to the SEC, you're going to have some growing pains along the way. Even Steve Sarkisian has had his growing pain when Texas got humbled at home by Georgia. So I believe that Brent Venables is going to be better for this. And I still believe that this dude's going to be a great head coach for the Sooners, as ugly as what this season has been. But, when you're banged up on the offense and you don't got good quarterback play and you're trying to win games like Iowa, that's only going to get you so far in this conference. Alabama got a bounce-back win against Missouri. They smashed them 34-0. I didn't even watch the whole entire game. I turned on another game once they went up big in the third quarter. And it was pretty obvious that Alabama was going to win this one pretty convincingly when you saw early on Brady Cook was banged up. And you got to respect the amount of toughness that Brady Cook has, because some of the injuries that he was playing with, the dude had like 3-4 injuries. He had like a thumb injury, he had an ankle injury. The dude was banged up in other places, and the dude still went out there and tried to give it his best effort. But it was pretty obvious that the injuries were holding back his play. And once he left this game and they put in Drew Pine, all hell broke loose for Missouri, man. And I saw a clip on X, Eli Drinkowitz going back and forth with the Alabama football player, just some friendly trash talk. And he said, you're only doing this because my quarterback's injured. Even if Brady Cook was healthy, Alabama still would have dominated in this game because Missouri is obviously not the same team that we saw last year, and that's to be expected. They don't recruit on the same level, and they lose so much on defense from last year. Their defensive coordinator from last year is at LSU. They lost a good amount of experience on that side of the ball as well. The thing about Missouri is that you just went into a team that they were not going to lose this game. This was a get-right spot for Alabama and a much-needed one. They needed not just to win this game, but they had to do it convincingly to give themselves confidence going into that big-time matchup against LSU, which their season is pretty much on the line. In terms of Alabama's playoff hopes, they already are in the playoffs, in my opinion. I mean, every game from this point out for Alabama is must-win. You can't afford another loss. And if Alabama wins out, they can beat LSU next week, and they can avoid disaster against Auburn and everybody else they got to close out this season. They got a 98% chance of making it into the college football playoffs this year. For Missouri, though, your playoff hopes are over. You got no shot now with 2 losses. You don't have a signature win, and you've been blown out against 2 of the best teams that you played this year. You already got smacked by Texas A&M, and then you get smacked again on the road in Tuscaloosa. And my thing about Missouri that I was trying to tell people coming into this season is that you can't judge this team based off the best season that they've had in well over a decade. You know, that was an outlier year. Now we're starting to realize that Missouri right now is like an 8-9 win program. Now they are capable of having a season where maybe they can compete for the SEC title. Their recruiting definitely is starting to ramp it up. I'm noticing that they're getting a lot of top 5 prospects, you know, good quarterbacks, good edge rushers. So their future trajectory definitely is high, but right now they still are a work in progress. And Alabama, this was the performance that you expected to see out of this team with the talent that they had. Jalen Milroe had the best game that we've seen him play in well over a month, it seems like. The run game finally got going. Justice Haynes, late in this game, had a monstrous run for a touchdown when he just destroyed the defender, ran them over Marshawn Lynch, Madden 25 style, scored a touchdown. And it was just added insult to injury for Missouri. It's just this season, you know, it started off nice when you were playing nobodies, but now that you're in the meat of your schedule, you know, like after they had to come from behind to beat Auburn, I was pretty much all but assured that Missouri was not going to be a playoff team this year, and their schedule was favorable. Like, there definitely was a path for them this year, but they kind of got a little bit lucky last year in a couple of their games. Like, they had some big-time field goals that Mevis had made last year. Your defense played at a higher level this year with your schedule increasing in difficulty and you not really being the same team that you were last year. You weren't going to have a chance at beating Alabama. But you at least thought that you could have kept this game close because I took Missouri with the points as a 17-point underdog. And even most Alabama fans probably would agree that they didn't expect for this game to be as one-sided as what it was, but this was that confidence builder that Alabama needed going into the biggest game of their season next week against LSU, because you got to go on the road against a very desperate LSU team, and they are capable, but right now I would take Kalen DeBoer over Brian Kelly. We seem to forget that Kalen DeBoer, despite losing to Tennessee and Vandy, the dude in the last year has beat Dan Lanning twice, Steve Sarkisian, Kirby Smart. He's beaten 3 of the 5 best coaches in the sport. So, I mean, like, I expect this dude to own Brian Kelly and LSU. I trust Bama more than I trust that fraud Brian Kelly. This dude continues to make excuses for why he can't win big games. Kellen DeBoer, this dude was winning big games at Washington. He beat Texas in the semifinals with a more inferior roster than what Texas had. You know, I trust Kalen DeBoer, and that's why, as ugly as things have gotten for the Tide this year, I haven't lost faith in Kalen DeBoer. I've been a little bit shell-shocked at times with how ugly things have kind of looked, but with how oversaturated the SEC is, you probably were going to go 10-2. It probably was unrealistic for you to be a one-loss team, and we really don't know if there even is going to be a team that finishes with only one loss with how chaotic this conference has been this year. But Alabama, they definitely got a bounce back win, and they showed everybody how good they can be when they're playing their best football. Their defense has improved over the last couple of weeks, but you still want to see a little bit more efficiency out of the passing game. But you can't really complain about this win. You needed this win, and you needed the style points to go along with it in the worst way imaginable, because it just seems like your season was kind of drifting towards being a complete implosion, and you getting that statement win against Missouri at least showed that you can handle the teams that you're expected to handle. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in, X, YouTube, wherever you're watching, Facebook. Smash that like button, follow the page, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content. Remember, we are a podcast. We are not just a YouTube channel. You can find this episode on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Please send me some mailbag questions on Instagram at JT Sports _ at JT Sports _ is where you can find us on X as well. Shout out to my guy, King Malik. He says, watch LSU drag Bama. Missouri has been trash all year long. Carla Jenkins says, OSU will always get that James Franklin special. She also says, all OSU got to do is throw it to Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Ibuka. Absolutely. JD Guitarist says, just wanted your take on Texas. Yeah, man, like Texas is a good team. I believe that Georgia, Texas are kind of the cream of the crop in the SEC this year. Whoever wins this conference is going to come down to one of those teams. But I wouldn't rule out Texas A&M neither. I really did love the hiring of Mike Elko based off what he did at Duke. Now, I got a few more things I want to hit on before I get up on out of here before the NFL games start. We also going to be going live after the Sunday night game ends between the 49ers and the Cowboys. And let's be honest, like, we know it's going to be a bloodbath. The 49ers own the Cowboys every time they play. But yeah, we're going to be live later around 11:30. But, man, Notre Dame just won't go away. After they lost to NIU and they blew my parlay earlier this year, I was done with Marcus Freeman and the Fighting Irish. I thought that they had no chance being a playoff team. But here we are going into week 10, and these boys have won 6 straight since that NIU loss. They're 7-1. They absolutely destroyed Navy. I thought Navy could have gave them somewhat of a game, but they've been on the warpath. Riley Leonard has played some really good football. That defense has been outstanding. But it's just, I just can't get behind Notre Dame being a playoff team. Like, I do expect them to have a few bumps to close out this season, rather it be losing the Army or getting upset by USC, because, man, like, this season just seems too good to be true. I've never seen Notre Dame look this dominant. Even when they had Brian Kelly as their head coach, this year's Notre Dame team is just playing with a different level of intensity. They actually have some pep in their step this year, but I can't see this being a team that can do some legitimate damage in the playoffs. This feels like a one-and-done playoff team this year because, I mean, like, your offense has looked good, but you're not going up against any teams that got defenses remotely as good as what you could see if you got to play a Georgia or a Texas in the first round. And you did beat Texas A&M. Like, maybe I'm underselling Notre Dame. It's just hard to really buy Notre Dame as a true playoff team with them losing to NIU. And I know Alabama lost to Vandy. Everybody has had a couple of embarrassing losses. I get that, man. But it's just something feels fraudulent about Notre Dame, man. I really don't believe that offensively Notre Dame can sustain this level of play, because Riley Leonard has more than showed that he's a really good runner of the football. but he's not that good throwing the football. And when Notre Dame goes up against a unit on defense that can get after him and that can make life difficult for him throwing the football, if Notre Dame was to run it back with Texas A&M again, I would take Texas A&M to win that game, and they'll probably win it by at least 10 points. Because when you play Texas A&M, you played them when they didn't realize that the best quarterback on their team was actually on the bench, that being Marcell Reed. And having Marcell Reed just brings a different element to A&M's offense that they didn't get out of Connor Wickman, which is you got somebody that's really mobility, somebody that has a lot of mobility, and also a quarterback that is just so dynamic with the ball in his hands that defenses have to adjust for it. You have to game plan for it, because if you don't, you end up being in the situation that we saw LSU last night where Marcell Reed comes in and they just look shell-shocked. And you got to be able to throw the football somewhat efficiently to win once you get into the playoffs. And I don't believe that Riley Leonard gives Notre Dame the ability to do that. Now, he is probably the best quarterback that Notre Dame has had since Brady Quinn. Honestly, I would take him over Sam Hartman. I would take him over Ian Book. But we've seen Notre Dame win with these quarterbacks in the past that they're good runners, really athletic, but when it comes to throwing the football, they don't have the receivers nor the quarterback play good enough to be able to take down one of the better teams in college football. You know, you're beating up on Navy, Louisville, where what would happen if you played Clemson? I would take Clemson to win that game. It's just one of those things where I got to see Notre Dame beat USC to believe that the hype is warranted, to believe that this team is for real, because I thought this team was for real when they beat Texas A&M and then they lose to Northern Illinois. And look, I get that Alabama, once again, people are going to bring that up. They lost to Vanderbilt. I'm high on Alabama. I love Kalen DeBoer, but I feel like Alabama, Kalen DeBoer, they deserve the benefit of a doubt. Because Kalen DeBoer was in the national championship last year. Well, Marcus Freeman, I've seen a lot of times where Notre Dame will be playing their best football, and then out of nowhere, they'll have a random loss to an inferior opponent. It has happened way too many times. And I'm not saying that I'm doubting Notre Dame completely being able to make it to the playoffs, win out, and win the playoff game. I'm just saying, like, I got to see more out of this team for me to really stamp them as being a legit team that can do some damage in the playoffs, because right now, I'm still not buying them as a playoff team. I just don't know what it is about them, because they do got a great defense, but offensively, I just don't believe that brand of football that they play equates to having postseason success. Miami destroyed Notre Dame, or not Notre Dame, but Miami destroyed Florida State as expected. 36-14 was the final score, and I'm going to be honest with y'all. I expected Miami to beat Florida State more convincingly than what they did. I thought the final score was going to be 72-3 coming into this game, and watching Miami play Florida State was a little bit disappointing because they were playing really conservatively. Cam Ward wasn't taking a lot of shots downfield. That's what he normally has. They were more relying on the run game. Damian Martinez had a really good night. And the offense just didn't really play with that same level of intensity, that same level of aggressiveness that we've seen them play with for the entirety of this season. And I really feel like Miami really showed a lot of mercy and grace to Florida State. You know, Mario Cristobal was kind of calling off the dogs. He was like, you know, we're not trying to beat a wounded horse. We're not trying to kick somebody while they're already down. Like, because if we kick Mike Norvell in Florida State while we're down, like, the dude probably is going to lose his job after the game. And I just feel like Miami kind of didn't come into this game with a lot of intensity. This game didn't really have that rivalry game lust to it, if you get what I mean. Because in these rivalry games, like, I was watching the Michigan State, Michigan highlights. You feel me? It was hard hitting. It was aggressive. It was guys getting into it almost nearly every play, it seemed like. Always some back and forth. It didn't really feel like that in this game. You didn't really feel the animosity. You didn't feel the hatred between these two programs. You just saw a game where you knew Miami was going to come in and take care of business, and they did just that. And I'm not complaining with that. I'll take a win like this any day of the week. But when it's Florida State, you really want to give it to them. Like, when the program that you hate the most is down, like, you really just want to put them in the dirt. You just want to walk all over them, step on them, spit on them, pick them up, choke slam them, do it again until they just can't move anymore. And I really expected more out of Miami in this game. I thought Miami's offense wasn't even going to have to punt this game. And the fact that Florida State was able to score 14, it just rubs me the wrong way, because when FSU is having a season as bad as this one, you really want to rub it in their face. You feel me? Like, this was a chance for Miami to just outright embarrass Florida State. And they did, but I don't really think it's as humiliating as what it should have been. And then you got Mario Cristobal talking after the game, like, if you're a recruit, you see what we building down here in Miami. You see the direction that their program is going. Like, Mario, cut it out. Like, come on, Mario. Like, you got Cam Ward. If Florida State had Cam Ward, they still wouldn't be as good as what Miami is, but they want to be 1-7 right now. Come on, Mario. Like, we know who you are. You feel me? You've had some bad seasons. Come on now. Be a little bit humble now. Mario Cristobal has been a little bit cocky this year. Wouldn't y'all agree? Like, he's kind of been popping a little bit too much for the way Miami kind of has played in some of their games, man. Like, can you shut up and win the ACC championship before you start doing all this chirping? Can you make some noise in the college football playoffs? Like, Miami's having a good season. You feel me? I'm happy as a Hurricane fan. I really am, but I'm not getting too ahead of myself. Every time people ask me, JT, how you feel about your Hurricanes? Your Hurricanes looking good. It's just like, yeah, I'm taking it day by day. Because I know how it is with this program. I know that they can be on top looking good for a moment, and then out of nowhere, they can just come back down to earth at any point. The only difference between this year's Miami's team and the years past of Miami football is that you got a superstar quarterback in Cam Ward. And this dude has been a blessing to Miami football. And as a Miami Hurricane fan, I really doubt we're going to be this good moving forward once Cam Ward leaves, because this dude is a program changer. And anybody who thinks that he's going to be a bust at the NFL level, like, you need to watch some more Cam Ward. This dude is an insane quarterback. There were several times against Florida State where this dude should have gotten sacked, but he's moved around, buying time in the pocket, making guys miss. This dude is just a playmaker. And anytime you got Cam Ward at quarterback, there's not a single game that you don't have a chance at being able to win. But if you take him off this year's team, I really don't know how good Miami will be. It's really hard to trust Miami with Mario as the head coach. And I really don't trust Mario. The only reason I believe in this team the way I do is because of Cam Ward at quarterback. But once he leaves and, the good season that Miami has kind of goes off into the bits because we start thinking about next year, I probably don't think Miami will win this conference over Clemson. Because Cam Ward is just such a program changer at quarterback that it makes it really hard to get a good read on how good Mario is as a head coach. It's not like he developed Cam Ward and turned him into a stud. The dude was already a baller at Washington State. He was balling at Incarnate Ward. So this dude going to Miami, playing with all that 5- and 4-star talent Miami has, it's no surprise that this dude's playing like a Heisman finalist. But when you take a guy like this off the team, it makes things a lot different, and you really got to coach the team up. Not saying Mario isn't already coaching the team up, but with Cam Ward, he can get you out of a lot of holes, like we saw against Cal, Virginia Tech. If you don't have Cam Ward, you definitely lose those games. And Miami, at least based off the quarterbacks that they've recruited, Ja'Cory Brown, Tyler Van Dyke, a lot of them haven't panned out. So it's hard to believe that Miami is going to be in the same position around this time next year once Cam Ward leaves compared to the position that they're in right now. But against Florida State, I just expected a little bit more of a domination. It was domination, but it wasn't total domination. Like, I really wanted Miami to kick Florida State's ass. Like, I really wanted to give it to Florida State. With all the crap their fans were talking, all the hype they were getting going into this season, I really believe that Miami didn't put their pedal to the metal this game. It looks like they were just trying to get by. They were just trying to walk out with the win and get on the next week, which is nothing wrong with that. You feel me? And you did cover -21, but it's just like, man, Miami really had an opportunity to rub Florida State's face in the mud. And the final score, I just think they could have ran it up a little bit more. Now, they were trying to do some trick plays in the end. You feel me? But this could have been more of a beatdown than what it was. Because Florida State, when you're going up against a team that has no dog on the offense, no offensive line, receivers that can't catch, bad quarterback play galore, you expect a 48-3 beatdown or like a 72-3 beatdown. But a win's a win. Miami is still undefeated. I'm happy about it as a Hurricanes fan, but I really wanted to see Miami just annihilate Florida State, because I remember that year when they had Jameis Winston. I believe it was 2013, and Miami still had Stephen Morris or Brad Collier. I forgot who was at quarterback during the time, but they just completely train wrecked the Hurricanes, and I would never forget it because the neighborhood I was living in at the time, it was an apartment complex. It was filled with nothing but Florida State fans. And when Florida State destroyed Miami that year, and they put like a 40 burger on them, and nobody would let me hear the end of it. And I just really wanted this to be one of those games that Miami beat Florida State so bad that they remember. You ever got a whooping so bad that you woke up 2 mornings later and you still felt it? That's how I thought this Miami FSU game was going to go. And you really can't say Miami put a belt to ass. I don't really think they put a belt to ass. Like, you feel me? I feel like they gave them a little bit of a spanking, but it wasn't one of those spankings that you tell somebody, hey, go outside, you know, get me a switch, and it better be a good one, because you don't want me to go out there and have to pick one for you. You feel me? But Miami's 8-0. I'm always going to be happy when the Canes win, but I kind of wanted Miami to throw a little bit more salt in the wound. Now, last thing I want to talk about before we get up on out of here, Colorado is officially bowl eligible for the first time in 8 years. Taking down Cincinnati makes them 6-2 on the year. And now we're asking ourselves, okay, Colorado has already completed the turnaround under Deion Sanders. They go from being a one-win program before Deion the Rise with all of his Louis luggage, to now being 6-2. We got to stop talking about Colorado making it to a bowl game now, because we got to start thinking bigger with this team. And when I talk thinking bigger with Colorado, I'm talking about Colorado being able to win the Big 12 actually being a realistic possibility this year. If they can beat Texas Tech on the road in Lubbock, they're going to win out and make it to the Big 12 title game, because Iowa State, BYU, they currently are undefeated, but 9 times out of 10, both of those teams are going to end up having a loss or two, because it's just the Big 12. Like, the gap between them and everybody else, like, it really isn't that big. Somebody's going to upset those teams, and that's going to open the door for Colorado to get into the Big 12 title game. Now, Kansas State, of course, they got to suffer another loss, but Colorado, the reason why I'm confident they're going to make it into the Big 12 championship this year is because nobody in the Big 12 this year is good enough on the defensive line to slow down Colorado's offense. And I was saying this before this season began, that the gap between Colorado and the rest of this conference is pretty big when it comes to talent. And the only thing that held this team back is their offensive line play against Nebraska, because Nebraska has one of the best defensive lines in all of college football. You saw how well they just played against Ohio State. And for Colorado to go up against that, it was something that they didn't really have the kind of firepower to be able to prepare for up front. But when you are going up against a team that doesn't have a good pass rush and weak secondary play, Colorado's going to destroy you because Colorado has 4 NFL caliber wide receivers. Will Shepard, LaJohntay Western, Jimmy Warren Jr., Travis Hunter. All 4 of those guys are going to be playing on Sundays next year around this time. And with how good Shedeur Sanders is, the best quarterback in college football, you can't deny it at this point. And you got Travis Hunter, and you got a defense that now has the ability to get stops, get pressure on the quarterback, force turnovers. Colorado has the recipe to win this conference. And you know what Deion said, yeah, we got Miss Peggy to a bowl game, but Miss Peggy, she's really picky. She just don't want to be in any bowl game. Miss Peggy is really classy. It got to be a bowl game that people are going to remember. Well, how about making it to the college football playoffs? I think Miss Peggy would be more than satisfied if that was to happen, which I believe that it is. I've been rolling with Colorado to win the Big 12 before this season started, contrary to popular belief. It's widely believed out there that I'm a Colorado hater, but listen, man, this is a good team. And all the haters now, what are you using now? You can say everybody Colorado plays isn't good, but doesn't that just show just the gap in talent between Colorado and everybody else? Colorado this year has beaten up on everybody in the Big 12 pretty much, and they probably could have beaten Kansas State having not been for a few plays that didn't go their way. And they only lost that game by 3 points. So that shows that Colorado is capable of being able to win this conference. And if they were to play Iowa State, BYU, I would take Colorado to win that game. Because Colorado just has so much firepower on the offense that it's going to be hard to stop them unless you just have a defensive line that can just erase them up front, which they don't have. And this team has gotten better throughout the season. This is not the same team right now that we saw go up against Nebraska and North Dakota State. The offensive line has gotten a lot better at protecting Shedeur, opening up holes in the run lane. For the first time, it seems like ever, they had over 100 yards rushing. They actually had a dominant performance on the ground. And Cincinnati, I don't think their defense is that terrible. I believe this probably could be one of the better defenses that they played this year. And they hung 30 on them with ease. Shedeur Sanders and those boys were going up and down the field like they were practicing on air pretty much. And when you got 2 of the best players in college football, it makes you a really hard team to beat. That being Shedeur and Travis Hunter. We keep talking about Travis Hunter for the Heisman, but Shedeur Sanders belongs in that conversation. Statistically, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in all of FBS. He has one of the best touchdown to interception ratios in college football as well. And this dude, without a doubt, is probably going to be the first pick of the draft next year. There are a lot of teams that should be tanking for Shedeur Sanders' services right now. Colorado, they're going bowling, but you wouldn't be crazy to be thinking bigger with this team because I currently got $100 on this team winning the Big 12 right now. And with how they're playing, if they can get it done on the road in a hostile environment in Lubbock, I would love them to win out and find a way to get into that Big 12 title game, man, because the Big 12 doesn't have an elite team. You got 2 teams that right now are really good at this point in the season, but once we get into, the latter half and we really get into the month of November, you're going to see BYU and Iowa State have a loss or 2. And I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas State ends up having a loss in. This college football season has already been chaotic. And that's why I always believe Colorado was destined to win the Big 12 and get into the playoffs this year, because there wouldn't be a better way to cap off a chaotic year than Deion Sanders in his second season as the head coach of this program, finding a way to get this team into the playoffs. We've already seen Vandy take down Alabama. We've seen Arkansas upset Tennessee. We've seen a bunch of upsets. And the biggest upset wouldn't even be Colorado taking down the team that nobody gave them a chance to beat. It would be Colorado doing something that nobody thought was possible, winning this conference with Deion Sanders rehauling this team through the transfer portal. He pretty much has went about rebuilding Colorado like how you would rebuild an NFL team. And everybody was calling it an experiment, saying that it wasn't going to work out, and Deion has proven you wrong up to this point. This is it for this episode of JT Sports Live. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Before we get up on out of here, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, follow us wherever you're watching, Facebook, X, YouTube. Turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we go live and drop new content. Find us on Instagram at JT Sports _ and on X at JT Sports __. Remember, we are not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find us on all podcasting platforms. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from, the JT Sports Podcast is available. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it. Giving us a 5-star review is the equivalent to donating $1,000 to the channel. It means a lot to us. We greatly appreciate it. I appreciate you guys for tuning in.